Hey guys, what's up? Shawn again. As I said before, a lot of you may remember me as the second half of Vaportron. We are still kind of going with the whole rebranding thing. This is actually my second cooking video. And this time I'm kind of doing something that I'm not quite sure if it really fits the whole cooking on a budget theme. But at the same time, it's a very easy recipe. It's a fantastic option. If you're used to, for example, mainly cooking for one person, two people, whatever, and suddenly you find yourself, oh no, I have to cook for this many people. You know, people are coming over for some celebration, whatever, or if you've been invited to basically a potluck, anything really where you need to cook for more people than you're normally used to cooking for a group, and you really want to impress. Trust me, this is a super simple recipe, easy to do, and it's going to blow people away. People are going to love it. I have yet to encounter anyone who has tried this recipe and did not love it. It's called Shipwreck. It's one my mother found years ago, I don't even know where, in an old magazine or something. We've modified it quite a bit over the years to our tastes. It is also, again, easily modified. Simply by changing up the seasonings you use, changing up, adding a few things, whatever, as I'm sure you'll be able to see very easily as you watch me cook it. And so I'm just going to turn off the camera for a moment, wash my hands, well, move the camera in so you can see what I'm doing, wash my hands, and get started. Okay, so here we have two of the main ingredients we're going to be using today, as well as our makeshift roasting pan. The more astute among you may realize this is a pot that just happens to have metal handles, so it is oven safe. We simply don't have a roasting pan big enough for this recipe, plain and simple. So this will do just fine. And if your pots happen to have metal handles, you can do this without any problems. So the first ingredient in a shipwreck is literally just sliced onions. Yes, they actually do, if you really want the quality, or for it to get a good result, separate it into rings. And these just kind of go in the bottom of the pan for two purposes. One, because they do add to the flavor of the recipe, and two, they kind of act as a way of keeping the next layer from sticking to the bottom of the pan. This is, as you may have already guessed, just from this part, a layered casserole style recipe. Very simple, very easy to do. Just toss it all in there. And with this recipe, you will want to season each layer. Keep in mind, with the first layer, you don't really need a lot of anything, if I can ever get anything to come out of there. But with the other layers, the next layer, the potatoes, of course, it's going to be a little bit thicker. So keep in mind when deciding how much you're going to salt and pepper and whatever else each layer, that you're going to want to take into account how thick is this layer? How much does this seasoning need to kind of sink down through as it cooks to properly season the food? Because if you're just looking at the surface, of course, you're not going to use enough. These I kind of had out a little bit longer, so they've kind of got that little bit brownishness to them, but, the potatoes. But not a big problem. They haven't been there like forever. They're not spoiled or anything. It just took me a couple minutes longer than I thought it would to get the camera set up. And basically just kind of spread them out relatively evenly. You don't need to be super careful about this. Just make sure, you don't have them all piled in one corner, basically. That's all it requires. You also don't want to have them like stacked up, perfectly like this, because then neither the seasonings nor the sauce is going to penetrate. You'll want to... I had it out of camera range. You don't want it stacked up like this anywhere. You'll want to have it spread out a bit so that the sauce that we're going to be adding in a few minutes and the seasonings can actually get in between the layers. So you'll want to kind of, like I said, just stagger it a bit. You really don't want anything too tight together. Otherwise, things just aren't going to penetrate properly, and you're going to have one section that's not really going to have any real amount of flavor to it. So kind of just toss it all in there. I'm going to have to try and speed things up a bit, or this is going to be a very, very boring video. I just realized I haven't turned on the oven to preheat again. I'll correct that mistake there now. There we go. So the oven is preheating as we speak. Some of you may remember when I made my homemade meatballs. I did that and it was quite a while. I had to put the meatballs in the fridge and They it kind of just delayed our supper that night. Just like before, this is actually, or some of it, we're not going to be able to eat this much, but some of it is going to be mine and Trevor's supper tonight, and the rest is kind of going in the fridge. We actually use different containers to make our own homemade frozen meals, which is a great way if you're on a budget but you want to have something really good to be able to have a nice homemade meal when you get home, and not have to spend a huge amount of time every single night cooking. It's fantastic, by the way, even if you're not, cooking on a budget like we are, but you just want to have a homemade meal, and frankly, you just have a job and you're busy. That's a fantastic way to just have something decent when you get home. That way you can literally take something out of the freezer, toss it in the microwave, but you're still actually getting a nice homemade meal that actually is worth coming home to. I do use way too much pepper in my purse, in a lot of people's opinion, but you know what? I like it, so oh well. And that's the thing, when you're cooking, well, a dish like this, usually it's for a group, so you'll want, if you're doing that, to take other people's taste into account, but the simple fact is, right now it's just for me and Trevor, and so I'm doing it to our taste. And you can add any other seasonings. I'm just adding salt, pepper, and garlic. You can add whatever you like to it. Some dill weed if you want a nice dill flavor to it. Some oregano, and some other things if you just want more of an Italian flavor. The original recipe called for a layer of ground beef and then a layer of rice on top of that. However, we found in my family that if you do it that way, the rice on top comes out very, very dry. So what we do is we reverse them and just kind of put a nice bit of rice. That little first bit, by the way, that I put in there, that was just the one that I knew was not going to be enough. Plus it kind of goes down into the potatoes a bit there and adds a little more texture there. As I'm sure you can guess, by the way, you can customize this in terms of the size of it. If you wanted to make this for a massive group of people, it's actually extremely easy to do. As you can see, the potatoes are kind of poking up through. I'm not going to bother seasoning the rice layer for obvious reasons. It's already going to be very well seasoned anyway, so there's really just not much point. Now, if you do really want to go for the appearance, the visual appeal, then go by the original idea and have this on top of the ground beef. But like I said, you do need to keep in mind that it's going to have a little more dryness to the rice if you do it that way than if you just have the rice underneath the ground beef. And of course, my usual downright obsessive nature when it comes to food safety when handling raw meats. No, you don't actually have to do this. I actually have OCD, so I'm going to be doing some things that frankly aren't really necessary just for the sake of my own personal comfort, and that's frankly the truth. I think last time, in my last video, I referred to this as though it was something super important. Wear gloves, wear gloves. If I'm going to be truly honest, no, it's not actually needed. I have OCD, and so I'm going to be a little more obsessive about these kinds of things than I really need to be. So, yeah, that's the honest reason behind the gloves. It is something, as I said before, that I did learn working in fast food, and I did take it home. And it was true, a lot of what I've learned in terms of food safety, when I was working in fast food, a lot of that really does come in handy at home. So, yes, if you've ever worked in a restaurant that actually takes food safety seriously, then by all means take some of that home with you, that information, and use it at home to keep yourself and your family safe as well. But the gloves thing, if you just wash your hands 1 or 2 extra times, it will have the same benefit. Then again, of course, if you really don't want to have to take the time to wash your hands extra times more than would otherwise be needed, gloves are a great way to get the same benefit. It's just really not a necessary step, it's more, there's alternatives basically is what I'm trying to say. Now this is literally just canned tomato soup with hot water, and I've mixed a few seasonings in there. As you can see, I've mixed in some salt, some pepper, some garlic powder because Trevor and I love the taste of garlic, and in this I've actually added a bit of oregano as well. And that's it. Basically just 1 can of tomato soup, 1 can of hot water, and that just pours right over it. This also is a lot easier to do, by the way, if you put the ground beef on top. I've found a few times in the past when I did it the other way, the official order, I suppose, for lack of a better way of putting it, for the for the different layers, then pouring this in was a little more difficult without actually having all the rice swish over to one side with the force of just the liquid flowing down over it. But other than that, that is literally it. This will go in the oven now for about an hour, hour and a half on 350. I'll let you know the exact time. Every now and then as it's cooking, just take a nice sharp knife and just jam down through it to let you know if the potatoes are cooked underneath. And that's all there is to it. So, in a few minutes, once the oven finishes preheating, I'll be doing just that, tossing this into the oven. This will help with the rice, by the way, because even underneath the ground beef is going to be very dry if you don't have a lid on there. As far as the onions, by the way, at the beginning, one thing I forgot to mention, a lot of people are probably looking at that and saying, well, why separate them into rings? Trust me, you will actually get a better result if you separate them into the rings. I know there's probably a lot of people out there like me who are thinking, no, that won't actually make a difference. Hopefully you're smarter than I was when I thought that, and are willing to take the advice of someone who's tried it. No, you do not get the same result. It won't be as good. In the meantime, like I said, we're going to pop this in the oven in a few minutes, or I'll be popping in the oven. Trevor's busy with other things right now, but I'll be popping this in the oven in a few minutes, and we'll be back, or I'll have you come back when we're ready to take it out. Okay, so here we are about 2.5 hours later, rather than the hour and a half that I had anticipated. I should have realized my estimate would be a smidge off. I haven't made this recipe in well over a year now because frankly I've had no reason to. But when you take a sharp knife and just kind of push down through, you can tell there's little to no resistance, meaning the potatoes are of course fully cooked. And with the ground beef on top, the way my family's been doing it now for a very long time, of course you can tell easily that the ground beef is done. But frankly, with this type of recipe, if the potatoes are done, the ground beef will be cooked by that point as well. It did take, I found, like I said, I haven't done this in quite a while, so it did take a bit more moisture than I thought it would. Probably because I had too many potatoes, to be frank, for the amount that I was making. But, I mean, you can see quite well, it's done just fine. So I'm going to move the camera in a second, and we'll be back in just, well, from your point of view, just a second. Alright, so here I am about to take up a little bit for myself. Like I was saying, well, from your point of view just a second ago, about a minute ago from my point of view, when I was doing it I found I didn't really have enough moisture. I had to do a second can with some hot water of the tomato soup. You might have noticed as well that there was a section in the middle that didn't seem to have as much sauce, and I had to add a little bit of water to it just to kind of have enough moisture to get the potatoes properly cooked. However, you run into things like that when you're cooking a recipe that you haven't done in years. It just happens. Needless to say, this is only a small sampling, which makes me wonder why I'm taking up so much. This is not all I'm having for supper, trust me. But as you can see, it's all very well done. Potatoes are fully cooked. It's pretty well done. As far as variations, you can do a lot of different variations on this. You could, for example, throw in different types of vegetables, maybe have a thin layer of carrots. I do recommend having a bit less potato than what I put into it today. That did turn out to be a bit too much. However, you know, you can add in some different types of seasonings. One thing I keep meaning to do and keep forgetting every time I'm on the rare occasion when I do make this dish, I keep forgetting that I want to try it one day with a cream of mushroom soup or something like that instead of the tomato soup, and see what kind of flavor that produces. If any of you do actually remember, because I was literally thinking about it as I was waiting for this to cook, if any of you do actually try that, feel free to put it in the comments below, or any other variation. You can add different types of vegetables. One thing we've done is literally just use, instead of the tomato soup with seasoning, we'll actually use just a watered down spaghetti sauce, or just a spaghetti sauce if it's a thin one, and that certainly creates a nice flavor. In this case, we've got here a lovely dish. That I really need to make more often, because it actually is one of my favorites. It's just that with this quantity, and when it's only 2 people living here, oftentimes we just don't need as much, unless we're, like I'm going to do with this, going to put most of it away and be able to have a nice home-cooked meal just when we get home, without actually having to take all the time to make a home-cooked meal. Other than that though, it is a fantastic dish. All kinds of variations you could do. I've seen, I know if I remember correctly, there were some of the suggestions when we found this recipe years ago, were take some little chunks of celery and just sprinkle them over the top as it cooks. You can, like I said, use all kinds of different vegetables, different things for the sauce, pretty much anything that you feel will go well together. One good thing about this type of dish is feel free to experiment. Try different things. Worst possible thing that could happen is you won't like it and you won't do it that way anymore. On the other hand, you might come up with something that you personally really truly love. So give it a shot, feel free to experiment, and feel free to put in the comments below how it turned out. In the meantime, my name is Shawn. We're going to have supper there now, and bon appetit.